They told her the past was gone, burned to ashes, and buried beneath the streets of Greenwood.
They told her the past was gone, burned to ashes and buried beneath the streets of Greenwood. But when Naomi Carter found an old photograph in her grandmother's box, she didn't just uncover a memory. She opened a wound that America tried to forget. Every whisper, every scar, every lie they built their fortunes on was waiting for her to find. Now, one girl, born decades too late, will stand against a legacy of silence to prove that the fire that once destroyed her people's home can also be the light that saves their future. Some truths don't die. They rise when someone brave enough decides to speak. The morning light in Greenwood had a way of cutting through the dust like it remembered everything it had ever seen. The streets still carried the ghosts of a time most people refused to talk about. The Tulsa that had burned, the dreams that had turned to ash. For Naomi Carter, 16 years old and restless, the air itself felt like history whispering too close to her ear. She used to bike past the old brick remains of what had once been the Dreamland Theater, its windows now boarded with plywood that had turned silver gray under decades of sun. That used to be a palace, her grandmother would say. People wore pearls just to sit in the balcony. But now it was just another scar in the town's body, one Naomi couldn't stop staring at whenever she rode by. Naomi's mother, Evelyn, worked double shifts at the Greenwood Health Center. The kind of job that left her too tired to argue about Naomi's growing fascination with the stories hidden under the soil. Evelyn wanted her daughter to think forward, not backward. "The past don't pay the bills, baby," she'd say, folding scrubs into perfect squares. "You got a whole world waiting for you outside this neighborhood." But Naomi couldn't stop looking back. She felt something in the silence of Greenwood's empty lots, a pulse, a whisper. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was the way her grandmother's voice still lingered after she passed away 2 summers ago. "Everything they buried here," her grandmother had said, "ain't just bones, child. Some of it is truth." That summer morning in 2003, Naomi's bike chain squealed as she rode toward the old library. She liked it there because no one else did. The librarians were friendly but cautious, like people guarding ghosts. Naomi often wandered to the back room where local archives were kept, full of crumbling newspapers and dusty microfilm reels. Most kids her age were talking about college, boys, or Beyoncé's new album. Naomi was reading 1921 death certificates. She didn't know what exactly she was looking for, only that something in her gut told her there was still a story waiting to be told. And she needed to find it. When she pushed open the creaky door that morning, she didn't expect to find anyone else in the archive room. But there he was. A white man, maybe in his 40s, wearing a tan suit that didn't belong in Oklahoma summer heat. His sleeves were rolled up, a notebook open beside a stack of old photographs. He looked up, startled, when Naomi entered. "Oh, sorry," he said quickly, gathering some papers. "Didn't mean to intrude. I thought this section was closed." "It's open," Naomi said. "Just nobody comes here." The man smiled, polite but guarded. "Guess that makes 2 of us nobodies then." Naomi hesitated, unsure if she should leave. Something about his face looked too clean, too polished for this place. She noticed the seal on his briefcase, Brockwell Industries. She'd seen that name before. The company had recently bought up half of North Tulsa to build what they called the Greenwood Renaissance Project. They promised jobs, new housing, and hope for the future. Most folks in town just called it gentrification with a smile. Naomi turned toward the filing cabinet, pretending to search, but she kept watching him from the corner of her eye. He wasn't taking notes anymore. He was scanning the room like someone looking for something specific and not wanting to be seen doing it. After a moment, he said, "You're from around here, right?" Naomi nodded cautiously. "Born and raised." "Then maybe you could help me," he said. "I'm looking for records from the early 50s, property deeds, ownership transfers. I'm researching land development history. Most of those are gone," Naomi said. "Fire took some. Others disappeared." He gave a small, knowing laugh. "Yes, that seems to happen a lot in this town." Naomi studied him carefully. "You work for Brockwell?" His smile froze for a fraction of a second. "Consultant," he said quickly. "Just helping with historical verification. They like to know the background before breaking ground." She nodded, but her stomach twisted. Her uncle, Pastor Reggie, had been fighting Brockwell's development plan for months. He said the company was building luxury condos on unmarked graves, land that once belonged to black families run out during the massacre and never compensated. Naomi decided not to mention any of that. Instead, she said, "Good luck finding what you're looking for. History doesn't give up its secrets easy around here." As she left the room, she could feel his eyes on her back. Outside, the heat slapped her skin. She walked her bike along Greenwood Avenue, where faded murals of jazz musicians covered the old brick walls. Her best friend Deja was waiting at the corner store sipping a grape soda. "You look like you just saw a ghost," Deja said, popping her gum. "Maybe I did," Naomi murmured. "Or maybe it's a thief in a suit." They laughed, but Naomi couldn't shake the unease. That night she told her mother about the man in the archive room. Evelyn listened, frowning slightly. "Probably some city official. Don't get yourself tangled in their mess, Naomi." "But Mom, what if they're digging up land that belongs to families here? What if they're hiding something?" Evelyn's voice sharpened. "You listen to me, Naomi Carter. We have enough to deal with without picking fights we can't win. Leave that mess to the adults." Naomi knew better than to argue, but something inside her had already ignited. She couldn't leave it alone. 2 nights later, she slipped out of the house with a flashlight and her grandmother's old Polaroid camera. She told herself she was just going to look. No harm, no trespassing. But curiosity was a dangerous thing in Greenwood. The construction site lay quiet under the moon, steel fences glinting like ribs of some mechanical beast. Naomi parked her bike in the shadows and crawled under a loose section of fence. The ground smelled of turned soil and gasoline. She moved carefully, the beam of her flashlight trembling as she walked between the skeletal outlines of half-built foundations. That's when she saw it, a patch of ground where the dirt looked different, darker, richer, as if something had been recently buried or unearthed. A small wooden marker lay flat beside it, the words half erased by rain. Lot 14, pending investigation. She crouched, brushing her hand over the soil. Her fingers caught on something hard and metallic. She pulled gently, revealing a small, tarnished object, a locket. The metal was warm, as if holding the heat of someone's memory. Naomi opened it. Inside was a faded photograph, a young black woman in a nurse's uniform smiling softly at the camera. On the opposite side, an inscription barely visible under the grime. "To J for the light you carry." Naomi's breath caught. She'd seen that face before, in a photo hanging in her grandmother's hallway. The woman was Josie May Carter, her great-grandmother, who had disappeared in 1952 under what the family called mysterious circumstances. Before she could process it, a light flashed across the dirt. A voice shouted, "Hey!" "Who's out there?" Naomi froze. She shoved the locket into her pocket and ran, heart pounding. Behind her, heavy footsteps thudded against the ground. She ducked under the fence, scraped her knee, and jumped on her bike, pedaling until the town lights blurred behind her. When she finally reached home, she climbed through her window and sat on the floor, shaking. The locket burned against her palm like proof of something she wasn't ready to believe. The next morning, she skipped school and went straight to Pastor Reggie's church. He was in the middle of preparing Sunday's sermon, sleeves rolled up, tie hanging loose. "Naomi, what's wrong? You look like you've seen trouble." She dropped the locket on his desk. "I found this at the construction site." Reggie stared at it for a long moment, his face going pale. "Where exactly?" "Near the new condos. Lot 14. He sank into his chair, rubbing his temples. "Lord have mercy. They told us those lots were cleared. No remains, no personal effects." "You know whose this is?" Naomi asked. He nodded slowly. "That's your great-grandmother's. Josie May worked at the old Greenwood clinic. She went missing one night after filing complaints about illegal testing at the hospital. White-owned back then. We searched for weeks. Police said she probably ran off." Naomi felt her chest tighten. "What kind of testing?" Reggie looked up, his eyes heavy. "There were rumors. Medical experiments on black patients using federal grants meant for community health studies. Your grandma used to say Josie had proof, kept documents hidden somewhere, but nobody ever found them." Naomi's hands trembled. "What if Brockwell found them? What if that's why they're digging there?" Reggie exhaled slowly. "That's a dangerous question, child. Those people have money, lawyers and politicians in their pockets. But if they buried the truth, someone has to dig it up." Reggie studied her face, the same stubborn fire that had once burned in Josie May's eyes. "If you're going to do this, Naomi, you need to be careful. Promise me you won't go near that site alone again. I promise, she lied. That night, Naomi sat at her desk studying the locket under the glow of a desk lamp. She pried open the back panel and found a tiny folded slip of paper hidden behind the photo. Unfolding it carefully, she saw a name and address written in blue ink. Dr. L. Harlan, University Medical Research, Tulsa. Okay. The following week unfolded with an unsettling quiet that wrapped itself around Naomi like fog. Her mother thought the silence meant she'd finally let go of her crazy ideas. But inside, Naomi was already planning her next move. She spent her evenings at the public library, not in the archives this time, but on the ancient desktop computers that hummed like tired bees. She typed Dr. L. Harlan Tulsa 1950s into the search bar and waited as the dial-up connection crawled through the internet. Most results were dead ends, academic articles, obituaries, but one link caught her eye. University Medical Research Program, 1951 to 1953, Federal Health Grant Records. The PDF was half scanned, half missing, but a few pages were legible. On the third page, she found a list of staff physicians. Dr. Lawrence Harlan was there with a note beside his name. Community Partnership, Greenwood Clinic. Her stomach tightened. He'd been right there working with her great-grandmother's clinic. Naomi printed the page, folded it, and slid it into her notebook. When she turned to leave, she noticed the same man from the archive standing near the exit, pretending to read a newspaper. Their eyes met for a fraction of a second. His expression didn't show surprise, just confirmation. Naomi pushed through the doors and hurried to her bike. The ride home felt longer than usual, the street stretching like ribbon under the sodium lamps. At every turn, she imagined headlights behind her, shadows moving where none should be. When she finally reached her porch, her mother's car wasn't there. Another late shift. Relief washed over her, but it was short-lived. An envelope lay wedged under the door. Inside was a single photograph. Her crouched at the construction site, flashlight in hand, the locket glowing faintly in the beam. On the back, someone had scrawled in red marker, "Some truths belong underground." Naomi's breath hitched. She looked around the dark street. The night offered no answer. She stuffed the photo into her backpack and locked every door in the house. The next morning, she showed it to Pastor Reggie. He studied the picture, jaw clenched. "They're warning you off, which means you found something worth hiding." "So what do we do?" Naomi asked. Reggie's eyes hardened. "We find protection before we find answers. There's a journalist I trust, Marcus Dane. Used to write for the Tulsa Tribune before he got run out for exposing a city hall scandal. If anyone can dig deeper without ending up in jail, it's him." That afternoon, Naomi met Marcus at a small cafe off Archer Street. He was in his 30s, hair unkempt, fingers stained with ink. "So you're the Carter girl," he said, sliding into the booth. "Your uncle says you've got something interesting." Naomi placed the locket and the printed record on the table. Marcus examined them carefully. "Josie May Carter," he murmured. "I've read her name before. There was a nurse who went missing during an investigation into medical grant misuse. City covered it up. She's my great-grandmother," Naomi said quietly, "and they just found this on the new Brockwell site." Marcus whistled. "That's not just coincidence. That's evidence." He flipped open a small notebook. "You said a man's been following you?" Naomi nodded. "White tan suit, works for Brockwell." Marcus scribbled fast. "That'd be Peter Lang, company counsel. Dirty as they come. If he's watching you, it means Brockwell's scared." He leaned closer. "Here's what we'll do. I'll verify this Dr. Harlan angle. You keep your head down. If anyone contacts you, anyone, call me first." Naomi agreed, though her stomach still churned with unease. That evening, a storm rolled across Tulsa, turning the sky bruised purple. Naomi sat at her desk, the locket open beside her. Lightning flickered, illuminating the photograph inside, the young nurse's calm smile. She traced the words "for the light you carry" with her thumb and whispered, "What did they do to you?" The phone rang, startling her. It was Marcus. "Naomi, listen. I found something." Harlan's research was federally funded, something about genetic resilience studies. The subjects were mostly black patients from Greenwood Clinic. There's a report indicating several fatalities, and Josie May Carter was listed as a whistleblower. Naomi's throat went dry. "So they silenced her." "Looks that way," Marcus said. "I'm going to the university archives tomorrow. If these records still exist, they could destroy Brockwell's entire project. Be careful, Naomi said. He laughed softly. Kid, I've been careful my whole life. That's how I ended up broke. The line clicked dead. The next day, Naomi waited for Marcus's call. It never came. By evening, news broke that a car had skidded off Riverside Drive and plunged into the Arkansas River. The body hadn't been recovered yet, but police said the car was registered to Marcus Dane. Naomi's world tilted. She sat on the edge of her bed, heart hammering. On the nightstand, the phone rang again. Unknown number. Naomi Carter? A man's voice asked, calm, practiced. Who is this? This is Peter Lang. We need to talk. I have nothing to say to you. Oh, I think you do. You're playing a dangerous game, kid. That locket you found, it's company property now. Turn it in and this all goes away. Naomi gripped the receiver. You can't own the truth, Lang sighed. Idealism must run in the family. Then almost casually. Your mother's driving home from work right now, isn't she? Late shift, rainy roads. Accidents happen. The line went dead. Naomi's legs gave out. She called Pastor Reggie, voice shaking. Within minutes, he was at the door, car keys in hand. We're getting your mama before anything happens. They drove through sheets of rain, headlights slicing the dark. At the intersection near the highway, they saw flashing red and blue lights. Naomi's scream cracked the night. Evelyn's car had skidded into a ditch, but miraculously, she was standing by the tow truck, soaked but unhurt. Brakes gave out, Evelyn said, trembling. Mechanic says the line was cut. Reggie pulled her into a hug. We're going to the police. But when they arrived at the station, an officer in crisp uniform glanced at the complaint form and said, Best you folks just let insurance handle it. Looks like wear and tear to me. Reggie slammed his fist on the counter. Wear and tear my foot. Someone tried to kill her. The officer's eyes narrowed. You accusing a company of attempted murder without proof? You better be careful with those kinds of statements, Reverend. Naomi saw it then. The quiet wall of complicity. The way justice bent when money whispered. They left the station in silence. That night, Reggie gathered Naomi and Evelyn in the church basement. We can't trust local police, he said. If we go public, Brockwell will crush us. But we've got something stronger than fear. The truth. He opened a file folder Naomi hadn't seen before. Inside were old photocopies. Letters from 1952 between Josie May Carter and a federal investigator named Eleanor Price. The letters described illegal experiments, forged grant records, and a plan to expose the scheme. The last letter ended abruptly. If anything happens to me, the evidence is in the light, Naomi whispered. The light? Like the inscription in the locket. Reggie nodded. Maybe she hid something connected to that phrase. Naomi looked around the basement. The church's stained glass windows filtered the streetlights into patches of color on the floor. In one corner stood an old wooden cross Josie May herself had donated decades ago. Naomi walked over and noticed a faint engraving at its base, hardly visible under layers of varnish. JMC, 1952. She ran her hand along the wood until her fingers caught on a small ridge. A hidden compartment clicked open. Inside, wrapped in brittle cloth, was a metal tube sealed with wax. Reggie's hands shook as he opened it. Inside were dozens of microfilm strips. Lord Almighty, he breathed. This must be the original research data. Naomi stared, awe and fear colliding. We have proof, Reggie nodded. Enough to bury Brockwell for good. Outside, thunder rolled again, and for the first time in months, rainwater began to pour through the cracked church roof, straight onto the old cross, washing away decades of dust. Naomi looked up, the rain running down her face like tears. Grandma always said the truth would rise when the ground got soft enough. Reggie smiled sadly. Then maybe tonight, child, the ground's finally soft. They didn't notice the figure watching from across the street, umbrella steady in the downpour, phone pressed to his ear. They found it, Peter Lang said quietly. Tell Mr. Brockwell we have a problem. The rain had stopped by the time Naomi and Pastor Reggie climbed the narrow stairs from the church basement. The smell of dust and motor oil clung to them, along with the weight of what they had just uncovered. In Naomi's backpack, wrapped in an old choir robe, were the rolls of microfilm that might prove her great-grandmother hadn't simply vanished but had been erased. Outside, Greenwood lay under a wet copper-colored sky. Neon flickered on the closed windows of the diner across the street. Reggie locked the church door, his hands trembling slightly. You understand what this means, child? He asked. Naomi nodded, though she didn't. It means somebody tried to hide the truth. Hide it, and maybe kill for it. They started walking toward his pickup, puddles reflecting the steeple light behind them. Naomi glanced down the block. Sure, she'd seen a figure near the corner earlier, tall still, watching, but the street was empty now. When she got home, Evelyn Carter was sitting at the kitchen table, half asleep over a cup of coffee. "You're late," she murmured. "I was about to call." Naomi hesitated. Telling her mother everything would only make her worry. "We were cleaning up the basement for Sunday." Evelyn smiled wearily. "At least the Lord's house is cleaner than ours." She kissed Naomi's forehead and went to bed. Naomi waited until she heard the bedroom door click, then pulled the robe from her backpack. The metal reels glimmered faintly in the kitchen light. She didn't own a microfilm reader, but she knew the public library still had one in the archives room. She decided she would go there tomorrow before school. The next morning, the air smelled of wet clay and diesel. She caught the early bus downtown, keeping the backpack on her lap. At the library, Ms. Caldwell, the elderly archivist with silver curls, greeted her with a surprised smile. "Haven't seen you this early since your history project." "Need to look at some old records," Naomi said, trying to sound casual. Caldwell led her to the back room where the microfilm readers stood like hibernating machines from another century. Naomi threaded the film into one, turned the knob, and the screen came to life with flickering images. Typewritten reports, dates, medical charts, signatures. Then she saw it. Tulsa County Health Department. Project Horizon, 1952. Below it, lead investigator, Dr. L. Harlan. Her pulse quickened. Each frame revealed another sheet. Lists of patients, most with African American surnames, marked Test Group C. In the margin, someone had written, "Transfer to state custody." Halfway through the reel, she found a photo clipped to a form. The grainy image showed a woman in a nurse's uniform, dark eyes steady on the camera. Underneath, Josie May Carter, filed complaint terminated 6/12/52. Naomi swallowed hard. Her great-grandmother had reported them. She scrolled further and found a memo. Subject JMC removed from facility following breach of confidentiality. Location classified. The door creaked behind her. She jumped. "Everything okay?" Ms. Caldwell's voice floated in. Naomi quickly switched off the machine. "Yes, ma'am. Just learning more than I expected." She waited until the librarian left before snapping her phone open. She took photos of every frame she could. The last image on the reel showed an embossed seal, property of Brockwell Industries. Her stomach tightened. That night, Reggie called. "You didn't tell your mama, did you?" "No." "Good. Keep it that way for now. But we need someone who can verify what's on that film." Naomi thought of Marcus Dane, the journalist who had died. "There must be someone else," Reggie hesitated. "There's a woman in Oklahoma City, Professor Delilah Grant, used to investigate corporate misconduct before she went into teaching. I'll reach out." "Okay," Naomi said, though fear prickled at her skin. "Uncle Reggie, someone's watching the house." He was silent for a moment. "You sure?" "Last night, a car parked across the street with its lights off. When I looked out again, it was gone. Lock your windows. I'll come by tomorrow." At school the next day, Naomi could barely focus. The whispers about Marcus Dane's accident filled the halls. During lunch, she sat outside under the oak tree and flipped open her phone. A new text flashed from an unknown number. "Stop digging, you're next." Her hands went cold. She deleted the message, but its words burned into her mind. After classes, she hurried home, heart racing. A black sedan idled near the curb, engine humming. She ducked into the alley, then ran the long way around to the back door. Inside, Evelyn was gone. Another double shift at the hospital. Naomi sat on her bed, trying to steady her breathing. She decided to hide the film somewhere safer. She lifted the floorboard beneath her dresser, a place she'd once used for childhood diaries, and tucked the reels inside a shoebox. Then she wrote one line on a scrap of paper. "If anything happens to me, look under the floor." That night, thunder rolled across the plains. Naomi dreamed of water rising, of voices calling her name from beneath the earth. When she woke, headlights flashed through her window. She crept to the curtain. A man stood by the mailbox, phone pressed to his ear. Even from the distance, she recognized the sloped shoulders, the neat gray suit. Peter Lang. He turned his head slowly toward her window. as if he could see her watching. The next morning, Reggie showed up early. "Pack a small bag," he said. "We're going to Oklahoma City. What about Mom?" "I left her a message saying you're helping me with church business." They drove 3 hours west, past the endless flatlands and wind farms. Reggie's truck rattled, the radio playing gospel softly. Naomi stared out the window, clutching the backpack with the film inside. Professor Delilah Grant lived in a modest bungalow near the university campus. She greeted them in jeans and a t-shirt that said, "Truth is the only revolution." Her hair was streaked with silver, her eyes sharp behind square glasses. "You found this where?" she asked after Reggie explained. "In a church basement, hidden for 50 years. Delilah placed one reel on her lightbox, scrolling carefully. "Lord have mercy," she whispered. "These are original state documents. Whoever buried them wanted them gone forever." She looked up at Naomi. "Do you understand how dangerous this is?" Naomi nodded. "Yes, but I can't stop." Delilah smiled faintly. "That's what they counted on, people stopping." She handed back the reels. "Give me 2 days. I'll digitize what I can and cross-check the names." As they left, Naomi noticed a black SUV parked across the street, engine off. The same kind she'd seen outside her house. That evening in their motel, Reggie couldn't sleep. He paced the carpet, muttering prayers under his breath. Naomi sat by the window, watching rain beat on the glass. "Uncle Reggie," she said softly. "What if this all ends like it did for her? For Josie May?" He turned toward her, eyes weary but kind. "Then we make sure it doesn't. She ran so you could stand." Naomi tried to smile, but the knot in her chest wouldn't loosen. She reached into her pocket and pulled out Josie May's locket. For the first time, she noticed faint scratches on the back, letters carved by hand. JMCTRUTH. She traced the groove with her thumb. "She wanted someone to find this," Reggie nodded. "And you did." Outside, the SUV engine started, then faded into the night. 2 days later, Delilah called. "Meet me at my office. I found something." When they arrived, she closed the blinds before speaking. "There's more than medical testing here, look." She projected images onto the wall, scans from the microfilm. After the 1952 experiments, Brockwell bought the land under the hospital. They rebranded the program as Urban Renewal. Every property they acquired in Greenwood was once home to someone connected to those trials. Naomi's breath caught. "So they're building over the evidence." "Exactly. And your great-grandmother was the last person to know the full list of victims." Reggie's voice was low. "Which makes her disappearance no coincidence." Delilah nodded. "You need to get this to someone who can protect you and the data. I have a contact at the Department of Justice, but if Brockwell catches wind..." A loud crack cut her off. The window behind her shattered, glass spraying across the desk. "Someone had fired a shot. Down," Reggie shouted. He pulled Naomi to the floor. Delilah crawled toward the file cabinet, fumbling for her phone. Tires squealed outside, then silence. When they dared to look, the SUV was gone. Delilah's hand shook as she dialed. "I'm calling my contact now. You two need to get out of the city." Reggie helped Naomi up, his face pale. "We'll head back to Tulsa. They won't expect that." Naomi grabbed the reels, clutching them to her chest. As they stepped into the hallway, alarms echoed from somewhere in the building. Outside, the first sirens began to wail. They drove in silence, the wipers swiping rain from the windshield in slow, weary arcs. The highway stretched ahead, dark and endless. Naomi clutched the backpack on her lap like it was a living thing, afraid it might slip away if she let go. Reggie's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "They're not going to stop," he said finally. "You understand that?" Naomi nodded, staring out the window. "Then neither will we." He smiled faintly, proud and afraid at once. "You sound just like Josie May." By the time they reached Tulsa, dawn was smearing gray light across the horizon. Smoke from the refineries drifted low and heavy. Reggie turned off onto a side road that led to the old Greenwood district. Many of the houses were gone now, replaced by construction signs, temporary fencing, and the half-built glass towers of Brockwell's new innovation complex. Naomi pressed her hand to the window, remembering the stories her grandmother used to tell about this place. The jazz clubs, the bakeries, the night of the fire when everything was taken. "History doesn't die," Reggie said quietly. "It just waits for someone brave enough to dig it back up." He parked beside the church and they went inside. The sanctuary smelled of wax and rain. Naomi spread the reels on the altar. the cracked sunlight spilling over them like blessing and warning at once. "Uncle Reggie," she said, "if something happens to us, stop. Nothing's gonna happen," but even as he said it, they both heard the distant sound of tires crunching gravel outside. Peter Lang stood at the door, flanked by two men in dark coats. His expression was calm, almost sympathetic. "Pastor, Miss Carter, I wish you hadn't come back here." Reggie stepped forward. "You need to leave this holy place," Lang sighed. "You think this is still holy? You have no idea what was built beneath your feet." He nodded to one of the men who stepped forward with a small black device. Naomi's eyes widened. "A scanner." Lang smiled slightly. "I don't want to hurt anyone. I just want what belongs to my employers." "You mean the evidence of what they did?" Naomi shot back. "The experiments? The people they buried?" Something flickered across his face. Regret, maybe, or exhaustion. "I'm not here to debate the past. I'm here to contain the future." Reggie's hand tightened around the nearest pew. "You'll have to go through me." Lang lowered his gaze. "Please don't make me." Naomi moved without thinking. She grabbed the reels and bolted toward the side door. One of the men shouted. A scuffle broke out. She heard Reggie's voice yell her name. Then the sound of a struggle, something heavy falling. She burst out into the rain, sprinting down the narrow alley behind the church. Her sneakers splashed through puddles. Somewhere behind her, an engine roared to life. She didn't look back. Naomi ducked through the gate into the old community center, long abandoned. Inside, light poured through broken windows in dusty shafts. She crouched behind a row of toppled chairs, gasping. Her hands trembled as she pulled out her flip phone. She called Delilah. No answer. She tried again. Finally, Delilah picked up, her voice shaky. "Naomi, are you safe?" "Barely. They're here, in Tulsa. They tried to get the film." "Listen to me," Delilah said. "You can't go home. I've sent everything I digitized to 3 journalists and a lawyer. The story's out there now, but they'll still come after the originals." Naomi's chest ached. Reggie's still back there. "Then get somewhere public, somewhere with cameras. They won't risk exposure." Naomi swallowed hard. She could hear footsteps echoing outside the building. Lang's voice called softly. "Naomi, don't make this harder. You're a smart girl. You know how this ends." She backed toward the far door, heart hammering. "Yeah," she whispered. "But you don't." She pushed open the exit and ran. It was noon when she reached downtown. The streets were alive again, people, buses, noise. She ducked into a coffee shop dripping rainwater, earning a few glances from the customers. The TV above the counter was tuned to a local news channel. "Breaking story," the anchor was saying. "Documents leaked from a Tulsa-based corporation suggest decades of illegal medical testing conducted on African-American residents." Naomi froze. Photos flickered on screen, scans of the microfilm, charts, letters bearing Brockwell's seal. Then her great-grandmother's photo appeared. The same one from the reel. Josie May Carter, registered nurse, missing since 1952. Naomi's throat tightened. Around her, people murmured, reacting. The barista whispered, "That's crazy." They did that here. Her phone buzzed, a message from Delilah. They can't silence it now. "Get somewhere safe." Naomi's eyes welled. For the first time in days, she let herself cry, not out of fear, but relief. Then the door opened, and Peter Lang stepped inside. He looked out of place among the college kids and coffee steam, rain dripping from his coat. His eyes found hers instantly. Naomi stood slowly, meeting his gaze. Lang walked up to the counter, placed a folded envelope down, and turned to her. "You won, Miss Carter. What is this?" she asked, voice trembling. "A confession," he said. "And my resignation," she frowned. "Why?" he sighed. "Because I was there when they burned the files 20 years ago. I told myself it was just business, that it was too late to matter. He reminded me it still does." He turned to leave, then paused. "Your uncle's alive." They let him go. Naomi exhaled, the world spinning. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because someone should." And then he walked out into the rain, disappearing into the crowd. That evening, Naomi met Reggie at the hospital. He had a bandage over his temple and a weary smile. "You okay?" he asked. "I am now." They sat in silence for a while. Through the window, the city glowed orange against the dusk. "I saw her picture on TV," Naomi said softly. "Josie May, she finally got to speak." Reggie nodded. "She always said truth doesn't die, it just waits for the right voice." Naomi smiled faintly. "Guess that voice was mine." He reached over, squeezed her hand. You made her proud, baby girl. Outside, sirens wailed somewhere in the distance, not of danger this time, but of life carrying on. Weeks passed. The story went national. Investigations opened. Brockwell's CEO resigned. Memorials were built where the old hospital once stood. Naomi returned to school, though nothing felt the same. People looked at her differently now, some with admiration, others with discomfort. She didn't mind. One afternoon, she stood in Greenwood Park watching the sun dip behind the city skyline. A small plaque had been placed beneath the oldest oak tree, in memory of Josie May Carter and the forgotten souls of Greenwood. Their courage lives on. Naomi traced the words with her fingertips. The wind rustled through the branches, soft and steady. For a moment, she thought she could hear music, distant jazz, laughter, the heartbeat of a world that refused to vanish. She looked up, whispering, "We did it, Grandma." The sky answered with light, spilling gold across the street where new flowers had started to bloom through cracks in the concrete. The sun was low over Greenwood when Naomi Carter returned home for the first time in months. The town, once hollowed out and silent, breathed differently now, slowly, cautiously, like a patient learning to walk after years in a hospital bed. The courthouse had been cleaned of graffiti, the old church repaired, and the charred remains of the Carter home had been replaced by a small community library bearing a bronze plaque. In memory of Josie May Carter, truth sets us free. Naomi stood in front of it, the wind tugging at her curls, her camera slung across her shoulder as always. The world now knew her name. National news outlets had called her the girl who brought down a giant. Social media had turned her into a symbol, her justice for Greenwood trending for weeks. But fame, she'd learned, was a hollow thing. It didn't bring her grandmother back. It didn't erase the nightmares of men in black cars or the sound of that basement door slamming shut behind her the night she leaked the footage. Reggie came up beside her, his limp more noticeable now, his Bible tucked under one arm. "You did what nobody else dared to do," he said softly. "Greenwood owes you." Naomi shook her head. "Greenwood doesn't owe me anything. It owed Josie May. I just paid part of the debt." The truth was, Naomi hadn't come home to be thanked. She'd come back because she couldn't shake the feeling that something was unfinished. The files had destroyed Brockwell's reputation. Executives arrested, Peter Lang under federal investigation, and the company's assets frozen. But rumors persisted that a hidden wing of the corporation had escaped justice, taking with it years of classified research and the identities of other victims. In the days after the exposé, Naomi had received hundreds of letters, from journalists, lawyers, even survivors from other towns who believed their loved ones had been experimented on too. She had promised herself she would tell their stories one by one. But promises are easy when your heart still has strength. After Josie May's funeral, her heart had cracked in ways she didn't know how to fix. That night, as she sat on the porch of her aunt's house, now renovated and full of laughter again, Naomi opened a notebook. On the first page, written in neat looping handwriting, were her grandmother's words found in a letter after her death. "Truth is not a sword to strike with, child. It's a light to hold steady even when your hands shake." Naomi traced the letters with her finger. That light had burned so fiercely inside her that it nearly consumed her. But Josie May's words reminded her that justice wasn't just about exposure. It was about healing, too. Still, healing wasn't what the world wanted from her. 2 weeks later, Naomi sat under glaring studio lights in New York City, being interviewed for a primetime documentary. Across from her, the host smiled tightly. "Naomi Carter, you've become the face of a national reckoning, a young woman who dared to challenge a billion-dollar corporation. How does it feel?" Naomi's lips twitched in something between a smile and a wince. "It feels like I'm still standing in the ashes of something I didn't mean to burn down." The interviewer blinked. "You mean the company?" "I mean myself," she said simply. "When you go digging for truth, you don't always come out clean." After the camera stopped rolling, her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "You found one ghost. There are more. Follow the coordinates below and come alone." Naomi froze. The text was unsigned, but the attached image, a blurred photograph of a storage facility marked property of Brockwell Industries restricted access, sent a chill crawling up her spine. She showed it to Reggie later that night, pacing the church's renovated study. "Naomi, you promised the FBI you were done going solo," he said, exasperated. "You're not some secret agent. You're a journalist, a kid who's been through hell." "I'm not a kid anymore," Naomi said. "And I can't ignore this. If they're still experimenting somewhere, people are in danger." Reggie sighed deeply. "You can't save everyone." "Maybe not," she said, "but I can try to save someone." 2 nights later, she was in Atlanta. The coordinates led to an abandoned industrial park outside the city, or what used to be abandoned. New fencing, security cameras, and fresh tire tracks told another story. Naomi crouched behind a row of rusted oil drums, snapping photos with her telephoto lens. Through the cracked windows of a warehouse, she saw flickering fluorescent lights, white coats, and something that made her stomach twist. A small room filled with hospital beds, all empty except one. A man sat inside, pale, connected to machines that beeped softly. His wrist bore a faint tattoo, B-17, Project B-17, the same code name from her grandmother's files. Naomi ducked lower, her breath catching. Suddenly, a flashlight beam cut across the yard. "Hey, you there!" She bolted. Her camera bag banged against her side as she sprinted toward the chain-link fence. A shout echoed behind her, followed by the sound of boots on concrete. She climbed the fence, barbed wire slicing her palm, and dropped to the other side. Sirens blared to life as she disappeared into the woods. By the time she reached her motel, her hands were trembling. She connected her camera to her laptop, heart pounding. The photos were grainy but clear enough. The facility was active. Someone was still carrying out Brockwell's old work. She sent the pictures anonymously to a contact at the Washington Post, using the same encrypted software Marcus Hayes had taught her. Then, exhaustion hit her like a wave. She collapsed onto the bed and slept for the first time in 36 hours. When she woke, her phone was buzzing again. Dozens of missed calls from Reggie and one from an unknown number. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Ms. Carter," a calm male voice said. "I think we should talk. You've stepped into something far larger than Greenwood." "Who is this?" "Let's just say," the voice replied. "Someone who used to work for Brockwell and who doesn't like what's happening now." Naomi's breath caught. "Are you saying the project's still alive?" "I'm saying the people funding it were never caught," the voice said. "And they've moved beyond Georgia. There's a reason they call it the renewal." The line went dead. She stared at the phone, pulse racing. "The renewal." The phrase sounded almost religious, a resurrection of something that should have died. Within hours, Naomi was back on the road. She had promised herself she wouldn't chase ghosts again, but some promises were meant to be broken. As she drove through the rain-slick highways of the South, she couldn't shake the echo of her grandmother's voice. "Hold the light steady, even when your hands shake." By dawn, she reached a small coastal town in South Carolina. On the outskirts stood another abandoned building, this one hidden behind an overgrown field and a rusted gate. Spray-painted on the side, barely visible through vines, were the words, "Greenwood Renewal Facility." Naomi gripped her steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. Greenwood, in the name of her own hometown. The past wasn't just haunting her. It was following her. She stepped out of the car, camera ready, rain soaking through her jacket. As she approached the gate, the wind picked up, carrying the faint sound of children's laughter. But the building ahead was empty, dark and silent, or so it seemed. Inside, she would find something that changed everything. Not just about Brockwell, but about Josie May's legacy, her own bloodline, and the very meaning of what it meant to be the last light of Greenwood. The inside of the renewal facility smelled of salt and dust. Rainwater dripped through cracks in the ceiling, tracing dark veins down the concrete walls. Naomi's flashlight beam cut through the shadows, landing on scattered medical papers, overturned equipment, and a row of shattered computers still humming faintly, as if refusing to die. The silence was thick but not empty. Somewhere deeper in the building, machinery whirred softly, a steady rhythm that made her heart beat faster. She passed a corridor lined with nameplates, each etched with numbers instead of names, R09, R10, R11. When she reached R12, she stopped. Through the narrow window, a flickering monitor displayed a looping video, security footage from years ago. Naomi pushed the door open, her breath catching as the image came into focus. It was Josie May. Her grandmother sat in a white lab chair, younger, her hair tied back, eyes fierce. The video's timestamp read June 14th, 1995, 2 years before Naomi was born. A man's voice echoed faintly from the speakers. Test subject J12 demonstrates high cognitive resilience and ethical resistance to directive programming. Josie May looked directly into the camera. You can't rewrite a person's soul, she said. You can't control conscience. It will outlive your machines, Naomi staggered backward. She knew her grandmother had been a nurse at Brockwell's original facility. But this showed she'd been a subject too. A whistleblower from inside. The tape flickered again. Josie May continued, her voice soft but steady. If anyone ever sees this, know that the light they're trying to bury will always find its way through. Tears blurred Naomi's vision. You knew, she whispered. You were fighting them from the start. The whirring sound grew louder. She followed it down another hall until she reached a reinforced steel door. Someone had tried to weld it shut, but the rusted seams were already breaking. Naomi wedged her flashlight into the crack and pushed with all her strength until the door groaned open. Inside, a single chamber glowed pale blue from rows of humming servers and cryogenic pods. Most were empty, except one. Inside the last pod lay a young woman suspended in translucent fluid, her hair drifting like smoke. Naomi pressed her hand against the glass, breath fogging the surface. A small label at the bottom read, Subject N. Carter, Sequence Continuation. Her heart stopped. They hadn't just experimented on her grandmother. They had continued it. Through her, Naomi Carter, a voice said behind her. She turned sharply. A man stepped out of the shadows, tall, gray-haired, wearing an old Brockwell ID badge. His hands were raised, calm. Don't be afraid. My name is Dr. Vernon Kells. I helped Josie May escape 30 years ago. Naomi's voice trembled. What is this place? Why is there someone with my name in that pod? Kells sighed, rubbing his temples. Because your grandmother wasn't just a subject. She was the origin of a genetic cognition study. They discovered certain people could resist neural conditioning. People like her and her bloodline. They wanted to reproduce it. The Renewal Project was designed to clone resistance. Naomi felt dizzy. You mean? They tried to copy her conscience? They tried, Kells said quietly. But you can't manufacture a soul. Every attempt failed until you. You're her legacy, Naomi. You weren't supposed to be born naturally. But Josie May, she destroyed the program and took you away before they could find out. She saved you. Naomi backed away, shaking. And now they're still trying to start it again. Kells nodded grimly. Which is why I called you. The Renewal investors want to reopen the line using your DNA. They think conscience can be coded. You need to destroy what's left here before they come back. Her hands clenched into fists. Then help me. They worked in silence, pulling hard drives from the servers, smashing them one by one. Sparks flew, glass shattered. Naomi tore through file cabinets, burning stacks of documents with a lighter from her bag. The firelight danced across her face, fierce and defiant. When it was done, she looked one last time at the cryopod. Rest, she whispered. You don't have to carry her name anymore. Then she pulled the emergency lever. The pod hissed, releasing its cold mist into the air, erasing the last traces of the renewal. Outside, dawn was breaking. Smoke rose from the building, carried by the wind toward the Atlantic. Naomi and Kells stood watching as the sun climbed higher. The first true sunrise she'd seen in months. You understand what this means, Kells said quietly. You've ended it. For good. Naomi looked at him, eyes shining. No, we've begun something else. Months later, Greenwood was alive again. Children played in the new library courtyard. The old church bells rang every Sunday. And in the center of town, a small studio opened its doors, the Greenwood Truth Collective, a multimedia center run by Naomi and a handful of volunteers. They told stories of resilience, from Flint to Ferguson, from forgotten towns to broken systems. Naomi's investigative series, The Renewal Files, became a national phenomenon, not because it exposed corruption, but because it showed the humanity behind it. Reggie often joked that she'd become the town's guardian angel with a camera. Naomi only smiled and said, Angels don't hide in clouds anymore. They write, they film, they fight. One afternoon, she sat beneath the magnolia tree behind the library, watching the sun filter through the branches. Her fingers brushed the small silver necklace she now wore. Inside it, a fragment of Josie May's handwriting preserved in resin. Light doesn't destroy darkness. It replaces it. Naomi took a deep breath and lifted her camera toward the horizon. The sky was wide and full of promise, the kind her grandmother had always talked about. As the shutter clicked, she whispered to herself, "This is for you, Grandma." For all of them. And for the first time in years, her hands didn't shake. Epilogue. 5 years later, the Greenwood Truth Collective had grown into a nationwide network. Dozens of small towns had joined, each one building a light hub, community spaces where truth, art, and education replaced fear and silence. At a ceremony in Washington, Naomi Carter received the Presidential Medal of Freedom for her contributions to journalism and civil rights. When the applause faded, she stood at the podium and said, "I was raised to believe that justice is something you chase. But I've learned it's something you build, piece by piece, person by person. My grandmother taught me that the truth isn't about revenge, it's about repair. And that's what we're all here to do." The audience rose to their feet. Cameras flashed. But Naomi's eyes drifted upward past the chandeliers, toward the faint morning light spilling through the windows. Somewhere, she could almost hear Josie May's voice, soft and proud. "You held the light steady, child," and she smiled, because at last Greenwood wasn't a story about loss. It was a story about rebirth. The last light hadn't gone out. It had simply found a new keeper.